Hey, team players, welcome to Local Football Flavor, breaking down the fantasy portion of the season. And the reason to care about Local Football Flavor, long story short, we make winners. We're not just going to be cheerleaders telling you go after this guy. We're going to tell you who you should avoid, who you shouldn't avoid, and we're using ESPN's list of a 10-round draft PPR, looking at the 16th round, and we get that it's June and that things are going to change, and we're going to be updating with you as the season goes on. But as we sit right now, this is ESPN's 16th round, and to me, Bob, Sky Moore jumps completely off the page at me as by far and away the guy that I want from this group.
Mhm.
And there's pretty far gap between here and the rest of them. And
Well,
my entire
before you start, let's clarify that this is not necessarily ESPN's 16th round, but these are players that you should be able to get in or around the 16th round as they equate to that. So, I mean, Sky Moore, as you're about to say, is probably going to go a little bit higher in this group. In this group, he's probably one of the better players in this group to go along with Zay Flowers. And so, as you talk about Sky Moore, tell us a little bit more about what you think his role will be now that Kadarius Toney has taken over the number one slot there, we would assume, outside of Travis Kelce, how Sky Moore would play a role in this Chiefs offense.
So the Chiefs offense is so hard to figure out because first of all, it's very technically sound. I mean, it's a very advanced. This is if you want to learn how to be an offensive coordinator, go to this. This is one of the most advanced offenses in the NFL, and as a result, it's very hard for first-year players to take over with it. Now, obviously, Kadarius and Sky Moore both fall in that category of joining the Chiefs last year. Sky Moore having the full offseason, being drafted with them and with them in the offseason program. So I look at the history of these two players, and Sky Moore has never shown any propensity of having a problem of diving into a playbook and coming fully enveloped and being mature throughout the process. Kadarius does have that problem. So when I look at the talent of the two players, I think that they're actually much closer than people think. Sky Moore is an incredibly talented guy, even though he's a second-round player. And the reason I'm even more in line with the thinking that Toney isn't as clear as the number one as the depth chart suggested is they use their second-round pick on another receiver. And the one thing in Kansas City is, yeah, they won the Super Bowl, not fighting any of that. There are holes on that team in a pretty substantial way in some pretty key areas. And to use another resource, the second round resource on a wide receiver, shows me that either Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore has a red flag, and just flat out betting upon previous reputations, I'm going to say it's Kadarius. So that being said, for when we had the conversation a couple rounds ago about Kadarius, as a 13th round, 11th round guy, I would definitely roll the dice on that, just as I would roll the dice here on Sky Moore in the 16th. And the reason is top 5 in the NFL quarterback, potential number two target. You got to be in love with that. And I also have the bias that I don't like rookie receivers. They tend not to produce. It's the normal trend. We got so spoiled with Jay, Jeff, and Chase, and we forgot that's not how it normally goes. So it is also for that reason I am against putting any significant stock in Zay Flowers, again, unless this is a league that has some form of keeper potential. And I want to just reiterate something that I believe it was Herb Street said on draft day. Zay Flowers was used to being in a system where inaccurate balls were continuously thrown his way, and now he has at least 4 more years of that. So do I want to get a receiver who's probably going to be the final wedge between Odell Beckham and Lamar Jackson, because Odell can't get open and Lamar's not accurate? It's a receiving room that I don't want to touch at all. Baltimore's passing game, it was scary, and the only reason I consider Lamar is because he's a runner. So when I go overall in the full thing of this, there's a very good chance Kareem Hunt also ends up on the Ravens, based upon reports of his free agency right now. The Ravens burn through running backs like it's nobody's business. So until we have a true place, we're going to use the same rule we did with all free agents. We can't rate them until we know where they're at. And I look at the other groups on this, the two defenses. to me, I would way rather have the Cowboys defense than the Bills defense. And Bob, if you're all right, if I can do a little aside just about defense in general.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you get points in. I'm going to use the word value because points can get a little convoluted when talking about defenses. You get more value the less total points they allow on Sunday. You also get value for your defensive position for turnovers and sacks. Of those four categories, interceptions, fumble recoveries, points allowed, and sacks, by far the most projectable one is sacks. So you need to have a team that A, elite pass rusher, and B, has a lot of lead. Well, in this case, both Cowboys and Bills, we both project to be having a lot of leads. Both of us think that the Cowboys are the second best team in the NFC. So therefore, they're going to have leads, and that's going to give better pass rushing opportunities. Parsons is one of, if not the best pass rusher in the NFL. So to me, there is no doubt I would much rather have the Cowboys defense over the Bills. But the argument could be, but the Bills, when it comes time for playoff time, are going to be playing these cold weather games because that's what we remember. We remember New England going up there in that Snow Bowl where they literally threw a ball and it went backwards because Mac Jones has such amazing arm strength. But when we look at the schedule this year, the Bills are not hosting during the playoffs at home. They are going on the road, and they're playing some teams that, if you're not in my camp and think Tua is the worst quarterback in the league, they're going to put up some points. They're going to Miami during the playoff push for fantasy football. And that by itself, I have taken the Bills off of my board. Furthermore, the entire reason you would want to be on the Bills is you believe that Von Miller is going to be back. He missed the entire year last year. And yes, he's a Hall of Famer, and Hall of Famers will always have spurt, just like Michael Jordan as a Wizard. But you can't build a season-long defense like this. And as a result, this was a very long-winded way to get to. I believe the Bills are going to be a streaming defense, and I believe the Cowboys are going to be one of the top three defenses that when someone gets, you're going to sit on them, and you're just going to love it. And I think that's a very simple fact, and I love it.
I mean, here's the issue with taking defenses, and one of the things that we touched on with the San Francisco 49ers defense is that you have to be fairly confident that their production, just as you mentioned with sacks, is a good metric to take, that their production is going to be pretty much the same as last year. And this is the damage that you and the problem that you get into when you think about kickers as well. When you look at kickers and defenses, these two positions are fairly volatile because their success is dependent upon a lot of factors. And, when offenses, like when you're predicting what a wide receiver is going to do or what a running back is going to do, there's a degree of skill in just a singular player that you can kind of be like, okay, he can overcome this specific situation or the specific player. But let's say the best player on Dallas's defense, Michael Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, whoever you want to name, say he has a bad day and all of it then goes to Diggs and Diggs can't stop anybody. Well, then all of a sudden, you've got a little bit of an issue. And
got -6 on your hands.
Yeah, and going back to kickers as well. And when you think about what is the kicker's role, if the offense doesn't get rolling, well, the kicker's never going to see the field. So there's a good opportunity that your kicker could have 0 points. Whereas when you're taking offensive players, those players are usually going to have a specific amount of snaps, but you can't really say with a kicker what's going to happen. And you can't really say with a defense specifically that this defense is going to be, without a shadow of a doubt, the best defense. Because when you look at the years past and you go through the top defenses of years past, you get to kind of like some interesting things where the Ravens have always been declared as a top tier defense. Well, last year they were 7th, but 7th last year was almost 50 points behind the best defense, which was the New England Patriots, and not the San Francisco 49ers, not the Cowboys, and not the Bills. And so those,
and also Patriots haven't come up on this list yet, and they have basically the same team.
Yeah, and those teams, so the Patriots, Cowboys, Niners, Bills, and Eagles were the top 5 defenses. They all scored over 150 points. The next best was the Jags at 139 points. So you've got to ask yourself, is taking a defense or a kicker at this moment, similar to what we asked ourselves about the Niners the last round, is it going to provide to you the most optimal way to construct your team? Is it better to get a piece that could go off? Because you're most likely not going to be trading defenses. You're most likely going to be either stuck with the defense you have or you're going to be streaming. And the question is do you want to take a chance on a guy like Zay Flowers or Sky Moore or Noah Fant? Noah Fant has the potential to be an extremely valuable asset in the Seahawks offense.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what the Seahawks offense is really going to be in terms of their playmakers. They have Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, Geno Smith, Fant,
Seattle very
Jackson
quietly
Smith,
has a pretty stacked
Lockett, Metcalf. There are 7 exceptionally talented players, minus how we feel about Lockett on most days. But the fact remains that that's going to be an offense that's going to get points on the board. And if you can get a guy like Fant in this round, and we've been saying you can sit on tight ends for a long time. So if you've been sitting and you have league mates that have taken 2 or 3 tight ends to fill out a flex, and you still haven't taken one yet, and Noah Fant is on the board. Granted, Noah Fant didn't score a mind-boggling amount of points last year. He ranked really. He was the 18th best scoring tight end in a standard league. And if you go to a PPR league like we've been talking about, and you sit here and you go, okay, well, where does Noah Fant rank? He's 17th. He had a total of 100.
Give me the difference between Noah Fant and like the 8th tight end.
So Noah Fant had 122 points last year. In a PPR league. He had one game where he got 0 points, and mostly it was like average around like 6. So on a game average, he was 7.2 on the game average there. So you want to go to the 8th best tight end? Well, that was Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet was the 8th best tight end. He had 2 games at the beginning of the year with 0. And so we go up to Cole Kmet going over Chicago, 147. So that's a difference of about 20 points.
You're talking about 1.5 per game at most.
Yeah.
I would much rather have gotten a bigger stud the round someone took that 8th tight end.
Fant was 7.2 points per game on average for Fant, and that's taking his lowest and his highest. And then Cole Kmet was averaged 8.7 points per game. So that's a difference of a couple of points. And now you're only getting into these big point differences if you go up to Tyler Higbee going up. So Higbee, Ingram, Andrews, Kittle, Hawkinson, Kelsey, they all averaged above 9 points, and the next closest was Freiermuth at 8.7.
Who hasn't come on this list yet?
Who hasn't come on the list yet. And these metrics are really important because if you are waiting on a position and you're in a 10-team league, Noah Fant, your decision between do I take Noah Fant later? Because he's gonna be a streaming tight end most likely this year. You're probably not gonna take him. But if something goes haywire with your tight end, he's going to be there, and I think he could be a valuable asset to your team. And you've got to think about that right now. It's like, do I want to take a chance on a guy that could be an asset, or do I want to take a known commodity in the likes of the Cowboys defense or the Bills defense? And I'm going to say that although the Cowboys defense and the Bills defense have a good chance to reproduce that, the offenses that they're facing, it plays a big role in what's going to happen here. And I want you to be able to get to your point here, but to that same point, this is where the kicker situation comes in at as well, is because Tyler Bass only had 146 total points last year. He was like, I think, the 5th best kicker. Daniel Carlson put up a ton of points, but that offense doesn't look the same. So to project him to be the 3rd best kicker after Evan McPherson, I think is kind of an oversight on ESPN's part because his situation has changed drastically. And I don't feel that I owned Carlson last year, so I really enjoyed that. But I don't think you're going to want to take Daniel Carlson anywhere outside of the last round, because in most leagues, kickers aren't getting drafted anywhere unless it's Justin Tucker outside of the last 2 rounds of your league. but defenses might be. And so as you think about how you want to construct your team, you're probably going to stay away from Michael Carter because he's probably not going to see the ball at all. I don't know why ESPN ranked him at all in this ranking. He wasn't good when he filled in last year for Breece Hall. He was decent enough the first year he played, but also not good. Kareem Hunt, also a very, he's a guy that we know is talented, but last year in Cleveland, you really got to look at his snap share and say, okay, well, what did he do when he was on the field? And it really wasn't much. I mean, you go to running backs, and I'm going to running backs here right now, and we'll go all the way down to Kareem Hunt. It's going to be hard to find him because he's pretty low down on this list.
Yes.
Towards the end of the season, he was chipping off less than 50% of the snaps. And that's 50% of the team's total snaps. And so, when you're just looking at the snap count just by numbers towards the end of the year, when you really needed him to show up, he's only on the field in the last 4 games of the year, 17, 33, 18, and 16 times. And I don't want a player that's only on the field 20 times a game. That's no value to me.
Cleveland knew they were getting rid of him. I do believe that he's currently counting Cook as the first free agent value. I think he's the second best free agent in the real NFL market. The question is just flat out, where does he end up, and does anyone want him in the Kareem Hunt world? But looking at his last year, especially when Watson came back, might be a little bit hard on him because I doubt that he goes to a spot where where he's just outright going to be just, you're not our guy. You're a distant number 2, and we're already getting rid of you. In fact, by default of him signing somewhere, that won't be the case. Cleveland knew they were getting rid of him, and that's what happened. They wanted to try out Watson to see what it would be like throwing it. And in a lot of ways, Cleveland treated those final 6 games as preseason type games, knowing that they weren't going to be able to make the playoffs anyway. So,
I do want to say this though: if you take Kareem Hunt's numbers, and this is even before they agreed to just going back to week 7. Let's say you go back to week 7 here.
Okay.
Overall, in the whole season, he was the 39th ranked running back. He had his best game the first game of the season at 23 points. He only then eclipsed 10 points 2 more times, and as the year progressed, his snap share went down. So even if he goes to, say, Minnesota, Minnesota would be his best landing ground if in a place like Minnesota, because we don't know yet Alexander Madison's potential to carry on through a whole year. But his situation has to be just right. And I think if you're thinking about picking him in this round, I think you're going to be relatively disappointed because he has a really, really low floor and not an exceptionally high ceiling for what you're expecting. I would rather take a guy like Flowers or Gallup in this position instead of Hunt, because I know that Gallup is going to, even though his numbers and his metrics weren't exceptional last year either.
Well, Gallup was hurt most of the year last year. He was hurt entering the year last year.
Right.
And he's still in the same spot. He's still the number 3 on the Cowboys. Again, the Cowboys, relatively speaking, not the hardest schedule in the world because the East is playing the West. They have 2 division teams that are clearly a step below them, and they're also playing the Rams and Arizona. Well, that's 6 games out of the 17. And so we look at that and saying there's a chance for Gallup to get some really good spice here. And what I'm looking for in this category,
he had 4 games over 10 points and 2 games almost approaching 20 points. And if I'm looking at it, that provides me much better value here than, say, Kareem Hunt. And it even, I think ESPN got it right here with Gallup, Flowers, and more, because they're all in very interesting situations with a quarterback that, if they decide especially Flowers and Gallup, with a quarterback that decides that they want to throw the ball a lot more, there's going to be opportunities for them to catch it.
Yeah, and the other thing with Gallup's situation that most people aren't going to recognize is the amount of downgrade that Dallas had at tight end is going to help Gallup. And he is the ultimate spot. Even if you already have loaded yourself with receivers, take a floater on him because he does have the possibility, as you said, Bob, of putting up a high teens, low 20 early in the season, and you can trade him for a more established guy, especially if you're the guy who's hoarding a position. And I personally love that mentality, especially at running back. But there's nothing wrong with doing it at receiver as well. And if you have legitimately a lot of studs, but you've just said, I'm not going to go after tight end, for instance, this is a way to do that. You can get the guy who said, get one of these tight ends, wait till week 3, see which one's actually getting some decent ball share, and saying, hey, instead of me streaming tight ends all the time and you not having a third receiver, let's just make this trade. And this is the kind of thing that I look for in this part of the draft. So to conclude the thought on kickers and punters kickers and defenses before we do our rankings here, Bob, it's for defenses is all about strength of schedule. And when we go to my personal defenses, they're very different than ESPN's. Because the one that I have, 2 of my top 5 aren't even on their list. So I look at it's all about defense. It's all about who are we playing. And for me, I don't want to play the Bills now that I know that the 2 games with Rodgers, 2 games with arguably the best receiving core in Miami, and then they're playing the San Diego, Kansas City, and if Denver turns on, that's 10 of the games. That's over half of the schedule. Do you think realistically playing that gauntlet that they're going to be a stellar defense?
No, it's not. It's less likely.
Yeah.
And for the Cowboys, they're playing again with the NFC East. They're playing all those division games. Something's gonna happen. Those teams, we would assume that the Giants are going to be a little bit better. We're going to assume that the Eagles are still going to fly. We're going to assume that the Commanders are going to be able to put up some points. And when you're looking at some defenses, and I know you said, the metric you could predict most is the sacks. The metric that you could predict the least is the defensive touchdowns. You don't know if this team is going to score defensive touchdowns, but I feel that if I were to choose between these 2 defenses, I would rather have the Cowboys, as I feel like they have a better explosive opportunities, and they're going to be facing some high-flying offenses this year at some point, just like the Bills are. But I think that the Cowboys have a better chance to. No, I'm just saying, I'm not taking
this to be their second and third ranked defense. I think that ESPN is just completely off because I get the Cowboys have Diggs. He can pick the ball off like crazy. But the Eagles are going to get sacks. Sacks are what correlate. Not to mention, the Eagles also got a ton of interceptions last year. I just that's what I go off of schedules. And this is why having the better team's defenses be better. You get more sacking possession. And to conclude that point, I never think it's a good idea to have a defense and a kicker of the same team for the simple fact that kickers are doing their best during shootouts and high-scoring games, and the defense has to be doing bad to allow a high-scoring game.
I would disagree.
That's why I would never have Bats and the Bills.
I would disagree with that. I feel that kickers, the way that I would like a kicker to thrive, I've owned Adam Vinatieri. I've owned all the kickers from the days, the New England kickers, when they were scoring 50-plus points a game with Tom Brady, Randy Moss. And you look at it and you say, okay, do I want a kicker that primarily gets extra points, or do I want a kicker that actually scores field goals? And what metric could I reliably predict on what this team is going to do? Well, if you can get to the 30, 40-yard line, my kicker has a chance to get 3 points. Now, most leagues have a scoring system where the further away the kick is, the more points you get. So, but they also have, if you miss a 40-yarder, you don't get any negative points. But if you miss a 30-yarder, you do get negative points. And so that needs to be looked at too when you've got to look at your kicker scoring system, because I really do feel that when you think about, okay, what do I want from that position specifically, I want a guy that is going to get at least 7 to 9 points a game. And when you take that across the whole season, you're going to have bursts where a kicker is going to get you 14, and then the next week he might get you 6. And so, to me, as I'm just looking at some of these kickers, an example. Last year, Jason Myers ranked 4th in kicker points. He had 159 total points, and he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks of 10 plus points.
Which is crazy.
If you look at Justin Tucker, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 above 10, but a lot right next to 9. And then
and this is the difference between those two kickers right there. Tucker did it on distance, and Myers did it on volume.
Yeah,
and so both systems work. I think it's safer to pick the team that you know is going to score more points.
Well, okay, I'm gonna posit this for you. Eddie Pinheiro, 6th best kicker last year out of Carolina. Carolina wasn't lighting up the scoreboard last year.
He was a distance guy.
Okay, he had 146 total points, averaged 8.6 points per game. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games of 10 or more points, and 2 games of only 3 points. So there's a good chance if you would have taken Eddie Pinheiro off the waiver wire last year that you would have been able to put yourself in position to win games. Evan McPherson, on the other hand, was the 19th best kicker last year. And there wasn't really anything wrong with the Bengals offense last year.
No, it wasn't.
You're looking at how many games did he have the opportunity to get 10 plus points in? 1, 2, 3, 4,
He had a lot of misses.
5. And he had 1 game of 17 points. And that was that game where Joe Mixon had like 5 touchdowns. But for me, touchdowns scored in high-powered games doesn't equate to kicker success. What equates to kicker success in fantasy football is the fact that your team is going to be able to get to the 30, 40-yard line. There's a name you're not seeing on this list for a reason. You know, Jake Elliott. Jake Elliott was in the Eagles offense. Jake Elliott is a really exceptional kicker. However, they scored too much. And that left him getting extra points. He had a total of 122 points. One of those weeks was 20 points, and that was at the end of the season. And you were probably already out of it at that point in time, or you weren't even playing because it was the end of the season. And so you look at the games that actually mattered, 1, 2, 3, 4 over 10 points. And so I caution it. Same with Minnesota. Minnesota scored points last year.
What you're making is the argument for taking a kicker at the very end and just saying...
That is what I'm saying. But I'm saying as you do that, as you consider the kicker that you want, don't necessarily think about, okay, is that kicker going to be on a high-power team? Yes, that's valuable. But just like the problems with the New England kickers in Tom Brady years, and the same problem with Peyton Manning is if you're scoring too much and you're constantly just getting 1 point for me, I'm probably going to lose that battle on a kicker-to-kicker basis every week. And that is something that you really don't want. I mean, Harrison Butker, as an example, missed 4 games last year, and he was sitting at 102 points. Kicker on one of the best offenses in the league. And so you're looking at the top of the board and you're saying, Brandon McManus from Jacksonville? Detroit's Riley Patterson was 11, and they scored a whole bunch. But then you come down and you're looking, okay, Young Hoku, Atlanta, number 5. Nick Folk, New England, number 6. I mean, this is a good opportunity for you to say to yourself and stop yourself when you're making your rankings for your kickers to say, I don't need to, I might not even need to draft one in the draft unless I'm required to. And I can just wait until the OTAs end, until minicamps end, until the preseason ends and say, all right, well, now I'm going to pick something up. Because eventually you're going to hit on something on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I mean, except for the top ones, which, and that's the other thing, there's no consistency with kickers because they can always miss. So I believe in the argument of give me a soft schedule, give me a dome, and go from there. And it tends to work out pretty good. And if you believe in the rookie in Indianapolis, as far as their quarterback, might not be a bad spot to look because no one's picking him up. So that being said, Bob, how about you give me your rankings here for the 16th round?
So based off of what we said, I would put Zay Flowers at the top of this list. I think he provides you a really good opportunity to get a boom player for a really cheap price. Same with Sky Moore. I have them 1, 2, followed by Michael Gallup at 3. Then I have Noah Fant at 4. And just because I have to rank these guys, I would put the Cowboys next and then the Bills. So we have Zay Flowers, Sky Moore, Gallup, Fant, Cowboys, Bills, and then I'll put Bass and then Carlson, and I'm not drafting Hunt or Carter. I think they're poor value for even this round.
I think the poor value is the draft period. Let someone else take that hand grenade. So for me, I'm starting with Sky Moore. I think his upside is incredible. Then would come Gallup, and then Flowers, Cowboys defense, Fant. It falls off a cliff after Fant now, doesn't it? I guess Bills defense, because Bills defense, Bass, Carter, and Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So team players, to become a team player, obviously clicks the subscribe. And then we're going to be doing a best ball league with all of the people who are interested as we get closer to kickoff. So if you are interested, leave your information here in the comments or directly email us. That's in our profile as well. And then we'll check you out. Have a great league.